This father formed a really strange relationship with a man who convinced him that his 5-year-old daughter was the reincarnation of someone he used to know. Then the little girl went missing. On January 16, 1973, 5-year-old Anna Waters vanished from her home in broad daylight as she played in her backyard. Anna's mother went to check on her after noticing an eerie quietness, but by the time she stepped outside, Anna was gone. After an unsuccessful search for her, she called police for help. Near the home is a creek that at the time was in its flooding stage, so investigators' first suspicion was that she may have slipped into the waters and gotten swept away, but an extensive search of the creek and its surrounding areas would turn up no sign of Anna. 2 separate people would come forward with a description of a white truck that was driving down the road around the same time of Anna's disappearance. Both witnesses recalled seeing 2 men inside, one described as being much older than the other. On top of that, Anna's brother described an incident that happened about a month before her disappearance when a strange man and a woman had tried to lure young Anna into their car. Things would get even stranger when investigators would look into Anna's father. Anna's father, a man named George Waters, was well known in the community as a doctor. But after Anna's birth, George would begin behaving erratically and was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia. His family refused to have him hospitalized for treatment because it would mean that George would lose his license and the right to practice medicine. George would go on to form a relationship with a much older man who called himself George Brody, although most believed this was an alias. Anna's family would describe George Brody as being very manipulative and having a quote cult of personality over Anna's father, and this would eventually lead to the divorce of Anna's parents when she was around a year old. After the divorce, George would move into a cheap motel with Brody, although he could have afforded a much nicer place, and then he began supporting Brody financially. George would also reportedly consult Brody before making any of his own decisions, and he stopped visiting his daughter completely. Even though he didn't have a relationship with his daughter, George's friend George Brody was extremely interested in 5-year-old Anna because he believed that Anna was the reincarnation of a woman he had lived with before. Anna's name would even be legally changed to add the word Ivy as her middle name, which apparently has no meaning but just proves the chokehold Brody had Anna's father in. After his daughter's disappearance, George never reached out to his ex-wife for case updates or just to check in. His only known reaction to Anna's disappearance was to ask his attorney if it meant he could discontinue child support payments to Anna's mother. The mysterious man George Brody would pass away from cancer in December 1981, but to make things even more bizarre, his death certificate listed no birth date, no known relatives, and no social security number. Anna's father, George, would then go on to destroy every file that had anything to do with her or his companion, Brody, and then he would take his own life by drinking poison in the motel room. Police looked into Anna's father, George, and the mysterious man who called himself George Brody, but couldn't find any evidence that they had anything to do with Anna's disappearance. A private investigator was also unsuccessful in linking them to her vanishing. Anna's mother and stepfather believe she may still be alive, and if she is, they say she probably doesn't know she's a missing child, and her case remains unsolved to this day.